something that I've had a beef with in the biohacking, performance optimization, whatever community you want to call it, since the beginning of me being involved in it back in 2015 or 2016 timeframe. Everybody's chasing the new toy, the new supplement, the new technology, the new practice, and forgetting the basics and forgetting foundational ideas of really what health is. And health, really what is health is the absence of disease, really. It's not just because you're not sick, it doesn't mean you're well, it just means you're not sick.
This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Rothling-Schofer. And if you are new here, welcome. It's been about 297 episodes now that we've been rocking and rolling. So there's a plethora of information, a plethora of guests, and a plethora of knowledge that you can go back and binge. If you're doing the cross-country trip from LA to New York City, you'll have more than enough content to be able to keep you entertained and ultimately grow those brains that are inside. What we do here is really help you understand what it feels like, looks like, tastes like to live a life in ownership. And we're all trying to get somewhere. We've got this mission that we're on. And anytime that we start living in ownership, when we live in accordance to what's actually happening internally, we can change our reality exponentially. But it requires that simple concept of ownership. And so what we do is we bring on guests that live in ownership, guests that truly embody that in every aspect of their life. And you're able to learn from their stories. You don't need to emulate them, but you can take little snippets that you can apply to your life and step in a powerful way. And so if what you hear on this episode and on this podcast resonates, if you're able to take something from it, I encourage you to go like it, subscribe to it, send it to a friend, and how it can ultimately serve them and get them closer to a path of a life by design. If you've been watching over the last couple of months, we've really been taking a dive into the health domain and people that have taken ownership of their own health, but now have ultimately made it their mission to go and help others as well. And today's guest is no different. Today's guest has really been able to harness the power of not reactive health, but proactive health. And what does this look like to be able to truly help the body regenerate and heal from a deep standpoint? And so Dr. Scott Sherr has been all over when it comes to hyperbarics and truly changing the game in terms of how hyperbarics are used in our everyday. And he actually comes with an MD, Doctor of Medicine, which is very unusual for a lot of people in this space. He's taken a course of traditional medicine, but shifted to something very different. And so I'm excited for you guys to have a deep dive conversation with him and hear from somebody who has the MD, wears the white jacket, but yet has a very proactive approach. So Dr. Scott, it's great to have you on the show.
That's quite an introduction, Justin. It's beautifully said, beautifully done. I can see you've done this a couple of times, and not just from cross country, but probably around the world 15 times with that many episodes. You can be listening to Justin and his guests talk about all these amazing things. But it's really nice to be here. I'm excited to speak with you and your audience and see what I can do to help.
No, I love it. It's so cool when you are able to have a platform that has so many different people with so many different outlooks, with so many different life experiences, and be able to put them all into one location and reach people. I think that's the coolest component of what podcasting was. You've got a podcast, right?
Yeah, we have a podcast from my team. It's called the Smarter, Not Harder podcast. And we look for, we call 1 cent solutions to $64,000 questions, ways to distill down really intense and intricate science and knowledge with really amazing guests from all across the spectrum of mathematics, science, technology, performance, on the clinical side as well, and really make it so that people can get really a lot of great information in a relatively short period of time from really smart people.
How about that tagline? 1 cent solutions for $64,000 problems. I love that.
Yeah, it's the 1 cent solutions situation, right? Where there's a story we talk about. It's called the Buddha and the Guru. It's kind of an interesting way to start this podcast too. It's let's see if I can get it right. So the Buddha and the Guru are walking on the banks of Enlightenment Island. In the middle of this river is an island called Enlightenment Island. The guru turns to the Buddha and says, I've been meditating for 30 years and now I can walk on water and reach Enlightenment Island. And the Buddha says to the guru, 30 years, that's ridiculous. The ferry to Enlightenment Island only costs 1 cent. So these are the fast ways to optimize, not just have to wait 30 years to get there and live in a cave, right? How can you do this in a quick way, in a fast way, in an optimal way? Not necessarily cutting corners, but there's the 1 cent solutions, the 1 cent penny ride to Enlightenment Island. So that's the premise behind the podcast.
I love it. It's so powerful because I think oftentimes, even in today's society, we get just bombarded from the health and wellness standpoint. You've got all these experts, and we can leave names out of it for today, but you've got biohacker X just pushing a whole bunch of products, a whole bunch of solutions. All of a sudden it's a coffee one day, it's a new coffee the next day, it's a new machine the next day, it's a new franchise the next day, it's a new energy drink the next day. It's like always something that, oh, we're going to hack your way out of this, rather than let's embody the entire person. Let's figure out what's actually happening and help you heal holistically. And not make you feel like you have to do all the things and just create a laundry list, but rather something that's very pointed and is going to get to be sustainable for you and truly help you at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've had a beef with in the biohacking, performance optimization, whatever community you want to call it, since the beginning of me being involved in it back in 2015 or 2016 timeframe. Everybody's chasing the new toy, the new supplement, the new technology, the new practice, and forgetting the basics and forgetting foundational ideas of really what health is. And health, really what is health, is the absence of disease. Really, it's not just because you're not sick, it doesn't mean you're well, it just means you're not sick. And that's something that a colleague of mine, his name is Dr. Ted, who's the founder of the companies that I work with, or that I help run, says all the time. And we have a nonprofit organization called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, which is a nonprofit that's training doctors and practitioners on how to optimize health rather than treat disease. And the focus is always on foundational biomarkers, a holistic approach that is, you can have all these tools and technologies that fit into the framework, but the idea is in its foundation, it's like, what is going on in your cellular level? I think you talk about cellular health a lot. We talk about that in our own framework, and everything else builds from there. But and if you start playing with all these toys and tools and technologies, but you don't have your house in order, like you're borrowing money from a bank that doesn't have any money, and you're going to default at some point, you are going to crash and burn. And that's what happens a lot in this community now. It's not so bad when you're 25 years old and you're pretty resilient no matter what. But when you're 35, 45, 55, and you're already having issues that are starting to get more significant as you get older, as happens to everybody if they're not careful, or even if you are careful, things still happen. You still are going to get into trouble, most likely, if you're just following the new recommendation by the podcaster that's selling that product because he gets a significant commission on it, or even the functional medicine doctor that's doing the same thing. And like, you have to be real careful about just the platforms people use and how they use them these days.
Such a great point. And because listeners, as you guys have heard me preach over and over and over again, is it's not about the absence of disease that matters. It's fake health, disease free, but symptom full. And all of these things that we just continue to accept as normal because the world tells us to, or grabbing that next tool, that next piece of technology, that next random thing to get us over the hump and literally act as a Band-Aid to a bullet hole, and not truly engaging in what does holistic health mean? What does healing mean? And so, Dr. Scott, I'd love to kind of dive in with you a little bit and go back in your journey. Like, what brought you to this place? What have you had to overcome in order to really take this ownership viewpoint of health? Because you and I see so eye to eye on so many things, and which is one of the big reasons why I wanted to have you on, was just being able to take a look at health in a different way, being able to see health in a different way, see health in a way that is reachable, attainable, proactive, and sustainable, so that you're not running away from disease. You're not having it like it's constantly at your heels and be like, oh, I just got to do the next thing. But rather, no, I've got a foundation, or I've got a house built on a foundation that's built on rock, not sand. And
Right.
what does that truly look like? And what's kind of your journey been on that path?
Yeah, Justin, I'm lucky. I think kind of won the lottery as far as being born to parents that were very not your regular type of parents. My father is a chiropractor, and he still is. He's been a chiropractor for over 40 years and still practices on Long Island in New York. And I grew up in his office, and it was never an office that thought of a reactive approach to medicine or to care. It was always a responsive approach. It was always a holistic approach. He always was emphasizing his mission, which was that the body can heal itself if it's given the right tools. He was, for many years, very militant against the medical industrial complex and how that really was not helpful for most patients. And I think over the years he's softened his stance and knows that there is a time and a place for everything. But growing up in that context was great from a health perspective, because I always knew that I didn't even know there was a box. I didn't know what conventional medicine was until I decided to go to medical school, actually, after having discussions with my dad in probably my late teens, early 20s. The idea being that there was a lot that he couldn't do as a chiropractor in practice that he knew that he could have done if he went to medical school, for number one. And so I'd have more leeway as far as what I could and could not do. I think the other aspect, and sort of the high-minded idea as a 18 or 20-year-old, is like, well, I can bring all these worlds together. I can bridge this chasm between conventional and alternative medicine. I can be this bridge builder and blah, blah, blah. Right. So, and that all sounds great. And I think, and I've hoped to try to accomplish that over the last 15 or 20 years since I've had those initial conversations and my training, but it certainly hasn't been easy. And I think a lot of that has not so much been having to do with the health and wellness side of things, because that's come pretty naturally for me over the years. I think what's been more challenging for me is the understanding that there's only so far we can get in life intellectually with trying to just push things to happen, as opposed to letting things unfold as they will, and more flowing with your journey, as opposed to trying to force things in various directions because you think that that's where they need to go.
I want to dive into that a little bit, because in the book that I'm currently writing, we talk a lot about that, where the world's view is body first, then what I call your heart, then your mind, and then your spirit. And it's, let's control these. Let's get you to do this morning routine. Let's get this and this and this and this and this done. Let's control the whole system.
Right.
But it creates a high level of anxiety. It creates a high level of fear. It creates a high level of angst internally, which thus changes our beliefs to be like, I don't understand this well enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worth this. This is too hard. I'm never going to be perfect. I can't be consistent enough, which separates us from our calling, from what it is what we're supposed to be doing, from what it is that we're supposed to be leaning into. But when we take that top-down approach of, I'm exactly where I need to be, I know who I am worth this. I am good enough. It renews the mind. It takes away the anxiety. It empowers you to now know that however this is coming, if you are educated and able to apply it right, your body then gets put in the spaces. We get the routines, we get the habits that are necessary for you in your lifestyle that become sustainable and are able to be there for a longer period of time. And so I'm curious to hear your take on that based on what you just said about not trying to control everything so much, but allowing things to flow a little bit more. And what I understood or heard you say is allowing yourself to be empowered with information to make proper decisions, so that you don't feel like you're having to force anything or create wedges in the ground that you can't move beyond, but rather, as you educate yourself, you're able to flow a little bit more like a wave.
Yeah, I mean, I like your conceptual framework, and I think everybody's a little bit different. There's certain people out there that, and I would fall into this category, that tend to be very head-driven already, that they think that they can make everything happen with their mind, and they forget that they're attached to a body.
Yeah.
So I think I fall into the category. I was really much more in, I would say, in that category, where I would think that your sort of your mind created your space, and that everything else would go from there. And oftentimes that was the case. But I think that for me, my journey was more actually getting out of my head and getting into my body actually, and trying to process the world in a flow that was focused on physiologic shifts rather than cognitive shifts. Because once I made some of those, then my brain, my cognitive performance became more flexible, in the sense of the flexibility started with, actually, even though I've been involved in the health and wellness space for quite some time, obviously since I was a kid, it was actually doing some real physiologic shifts for me that actually started changing my psychology, right? So I remember listening to a podcast in like, I think it was around 2014 on fasting. And I had never done any fasting before. I never thought I wanted to do fast. I was scared of fasting, like a lot of people are when they first hear like, oh, I'm going to go 2 hours without eating, let alone 3 days, right? And so I always thought of myself as a hypermetabolic guy. And so I had my first 3-day fast when my kids were out of town with my wife, and my brain was the clearest that had ever been before. Because when you go and fast and you go into fat burning mode, your brain starts optimizing itself. And this is all evolutionarily programmed. If you're 3 days without eating 1,000 years ago, you had to be more focused. You had to be more flexible. You had to be more ready to get in flow so you can catch that animal and feed your family, so that you don't die from starvation. So this is called ketosis. This is fat burning, things like that. So I had never explored this, but it was a really big shift for me, because my brain, I thought my brain was pretty clear. I was in my early 30s at the time, but it was like a clarity that I never felt before. And it was almost spiritual in a sense. And it was sort of like my first sort of spiritual experience, if you want to call it that, because it was really my brain finally having more flexibility, right? And finally being able to be more cross-sectional in the way that it was programming and processing information. And so when I was able to do that, I realized that some of the things that I've been trying really hard to do, really hard to get something to work that wasn't working, really hard to try to start something and grow something that wasn't growing. Why did that crash and burn? It was like, oh, because this is why I'm forcing this instead of flowing with the issues and navigating and iterating and just taking it one step at a time. I was looking 20 steps in a row, 20 steps ahead of time, right? And not focusing on the present moment. And you know how this goes, right? If you're living in the future, you're anxious. If you're living in the past, you're depressed, right? And I was living with this. I didn't think about it at the time, but I was living with this like sort of constant anxiety that I wasn't doing enough, that I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go. I mean, fast forward 10 years, I am so much more effing busy now than I've ever been, but I don't feel that anxiety most of the time, because I know where I am. I know what I'm doing. I know that the focus is here, and that every step along the way will just, you create a roadmap, you throw it out into the universe, and then you just flow with it. Right. So, but I think it was, for me, I do agree that psychology is a big piece of this. I think a lot of people can be very helpful. I think coaches can be great. But I think the physiologic correlate for me was really important. And I've known with my clients over the years, it can be very, 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 very helpful too. If your body's not working, if your cells aren't working, if you're not making energy effectively, if you're not detoxing well, like you can definitely change your psychology to some degree, but it's transformative when you're also, have that sort of physiologic alignment as well.
100%. I'll even create some more clarity on this and use the example you just gave. I'm 100% on your in agreement with you, in alignment, where you talk about, yes, there's some physiological interactions between what happens psychologically to get there, but there's this back and forth play, right? So you said you'd never fasted before. There was you straight up said there was a fear of fasting, a fear of not eating.
Sure.
Well, the world told you, oh no, you should start fasting, and you're like, oh my gosh, no, I can't fast. That's scary. And then the belief behind that was, I'm going to be hungry all the time. I'm not going to feel well. I'm going to have no energy. I can't do that, which thus dissociated you from the connection spiritually as to like why I should do that. It kept you away from it. But all of a sudden, when your wife and kids went away, you're like, okay, I'm going to connect spiritually to whatever this event is. I am going to do this because I feel like they're not here. What's the worst that can happen? The fear went away. You went and experienced that. And now that cycle just happened much more quickly because you were experiencing it physiologically, changing what was happening psychologically. And now it's a complete rewiring of the brain of what this looks like. You've experienced it. You've done it. You've done something hard. This is why people always say you have to do hard things. Well, it's not just about doing hard things. It's about getting aligned spiritually so you can do the hard thing and make sure that it's sustainable so that you get the physiological change to solidify and make sure that that change is real and sustainable.
Yeah, that's beautifully framed. I don't disagree with any of that. I do feel like everything is a loop. You just have to kind of find where you're going to throw yourself in there to change your inflection or change your, what is it like? I think I'm thinking of like I don't know if you like this example. Do you remember back in the day in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure when they were on these, like they're in the phone booth and they're in then like this stream going from one location to the other? It's like you just want to flip that stream into a different path entirely, like throw the phone booth into another one. And that's what you do, right? You throw yourself into a different jet stream or whatever. And then it's like a whole different area. Everything else is just, everything opens up to you. Not everything, but so many other possibilities open up to you when you're able just to kind of shift that just a little bit.
Yep. So you talk a lot about how you're busier now than ever. You've got more going on now than ever. And yet you feel more connected. You feel like you're able to get more done. You feel like you're in a better rhythm now than ever. Where does that difference come from of the Dr. Scott previously, where it was just a constant push to get everything done and living in anxiety, living in fear, trying to like be successful and get to where you wanted to go, to Dr. Scott of today, where no, I'm in the flow state. I feel good. I'm operating in this. I'm taking ownership of where I should be. And they're two completely different realities, even though what they're under is a little bit similar in the overall stress category.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to approach answering this. I think the easiest way is that it's all a game, man. And it's not, nothing's real. It's all a figment of your imagination. Everything that you see around you, everything that you get experienced on a day-to-day basis is being created in your brain and nobody else's, in your own context of your life's memories, experiences, sensations, and everything else. And so when you realize that nothing really matters in a lot of ways, then it's a lot more freeing in the sense that, you get to create your own reality. You're just like, the way to think about this sometimes is like one way to think about it. And one way I do a lot of, I think for me, a lot of this has to do with a lot of the work that I've done in meditation, in mindfulness, in understanding my understanding of consciousness and with teachers and mentors over the years, is like one of the ways to think about it is that like you are watching the movie of your life on a screen, right? But you're the actor, you're the director. You can change the plot at any time. You can change the colors. You can change the location. Like all that stuff it's all under your control, and it's not, and you can turn the lights on at any moment in the theater and realize it's just a movie. It's all it is, right? So it's a nice way of remembering the context here. It's like, what is truly important? And then within these illusions that are playing out all around you, like what is the most important part of that for you? Is it your job? Is it your dog? Is it your family? Like, and then all that is totally fine, whatever those priorities are. And so whenever I start getting into these, and it still happens, of course, when I get overwhelmed with everything that's happening at the same time, I just try to take a step back, try to take some deep breaths and go, okay, what is truly important here? What is real? And what is, really real is not the right word. Like, what is this creation that I've decided to get so wrapped up in all of a sudden? So in the sense that, the other way to think about this is that, and I talk about this, and my kids have been a great sort of training ground for this, and they're great at it as well because they're also very spongy. They soak things up, and then they'll even reflect these things to me when I get stressed. For example, is like all those thoughts in your mind, they're going to go away in a minute anyway. Nothing lasts forever. You have to really try to keep angry, sad, happy thoughts going. Everything is just arising and passing away. This is another one of those meditation ideas, but everything arises, everything passes away. Like clouds in the sky, they come and they go, right? And so and my daughter will be like, oh, this is a tough cloud, Dad, and I'm like, yes, it can be a really hard one. It can have thunder, you can have lightning, you can have hail the size of golf balls or larger here in Colorado where I live. But it goes away, it doesn't last forever, right? So it's just, I think, having their perspective that's sort of distancing yourself from what you think is reality, which is the things that are going on in your head, which are all just illusions and all just related to processing of memories, of senses, of everything else, and just take some distance from that. And then things tend to be okay.
What are some of the strategies that you utilize that you've engaged in some form of practice with that have started to help shape that for you, either mentally or physically, where I'm sure there's a combination of a few that you've been able to start implementing into your life? Because running the practice that you do, having a family, having children, there's all the stressors that everybody else is experiencing. And I love how you pointed it, or how you said it, where it's a game, and you have to be able to just realize that you have the power to control, to make a choice and do something different. If you don't like the outcome, do something different. Right. And so I'm curious as to what your practices have been that you're able to start creating the different that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, mental and physical training. I think people don't have the ability to just drop into these things. It takes practice. And I think 100%. That's what people don't realize. Just like you want to go and be able to run faster or swim further, you have to exercise, you have to maintain. If you don't use it, you lose it. And that's not, it's not just an aphorism or a euphemism, whatever they call it. It's just, it's real, right? And so this is what happens with mental training. It's something that has to be done on a regular basis. And when I slack, I feel it. I feel it when I'm not taking the time every day to take time to do some sort of mindfulness meditation practice. It doesn't have to be the entire day. It can just be micro moments throughout the day. It could be a moment when we're having our interview today and just remembering, like, this is a game, right? That's all I tell myself. I'm like, oh, okay, this is just a game, or whatever. So like, it just takes some of the stress out of it. So you can there's lots of different types of meditation practices. There's lots of different types of mindfulness practices. There's obviously there's Buddhist teachings. There's secular teachings. There's Western. There's lots of different ways to approach this, and there's no right way for any single person. There's a right way for everybody, and there's probably a lot of right ways, but there's no one right way for everybody. And so I've been more sort of more focused on the Buddhist philosophies of understanding mindfulness and the self and illusion and things like that. And so that's a big part of what I do from a regular basis. And I have, like I said, like with my kids, it's great because I get to practice these lessons on a regular basis. So I get to practice with them and say, okay, this is the lesson that we're going to talk about tonight, or this is what we're going to do today to focus on. And it's amazing how easily it works on children who have a lot less psychology that's been built up for X amounts of years. Like a great example is I was talking to my daughter, it's probably a couple of years now, but she was perseverating or just couldn't stop thinking about this one thing. It wasn't anything major, but she just couldn't stop thinking about it. And what we'll do, as you know, is we'll just avoid the crap out of it, try to think of something else, try to find something else to do. But she just kept thinking about it. And then, okay, let's have a different strategy here. Let's try to think about it so precisely, so closely, and see what happens. This is a mindfulness trick, or just not a trick, but it's a mindfulness practice. But if you do that, you'll often notice that thought will suddenly just vanish. And that's exactly what happened to her. She's like, Dad, it's gone. It's gone. And so that's one of the things that I like to practice with my kids, but I mean, things that I do myself. So you have the cognitive sort of the mental gymnastics, the mental training. Then there's the physical training. The physical training is just as important. Like, you have to have your body in optimal shape. You have to be training yourself physiologically, because the physiologic shifts are really great, not only for longevity and for optimal health, like overall, but also for cognitive health, and being able to say, if I'm having a really hard time, if I go do 100 push-ups, I'm going to feel different, right? So like, I'm going to feel better in some way. So I remember, just to give another story, I worked with somebody little while back, probably 4 or 5 years ago now. He was a very, very high-end athlete in his field. He had a severe concussion. He broke his neck. He was doing okay. He was recovering. We were doing a number of different modalities. But I talked to him in a parking lot once. He thought he just wanted to kill himself. He just had this moment that everything was just terrible. And he just felt like his mind was just, he just couldn't deal with it anymore. Right. So what I had him do was just get out of the car and jump up and down 15 times. That's all. Just like, I know you don't want to do this, but just go jump up and down 15 times, hands up in the air as high as you can, then get back in the car and talk to me. Right. And it was just that physiologic shift after 15 jumps that allowed him to have a complete shift in how he felt. Right. So it's not like this is like, you don't have to be like a triathlete. You don't have to be like the strongest person alive. Like it just takes like, and I tell my patients this, like, just walk around the flipping block and you're going to feel better. Right. So it's not like it has to be huge, but I think these physiologic shifts can be really transformative for people as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think oftentimes our world and history teaches us to avoid stress, to walk away from it. You talk about the concept with your daughter is like, no, just run away from that thought. Don't just pretend it's not there. Like, don't seek too hard of a workout because we want to stay away from that. Don't seek too many hard conversations. Don't seek too many tough business decisions or whatever it might be, because our body doesn't know the difference. Mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress doesn't know the difference, real or perceived, doesn't know the difference, positive or negative. So let's just avoid it. Let's just avoid it and just keep minimal stress on ourselves. Instead, we need to seek that stress. We need to show up. We need to confront it. We need to be exposed to it, but we need to create a rhythm between stress or overreaching or having it added, and then rest and regeneration. And when we find that rhythm, we ultimately are able to live in this space of empowerment, this space of optimal, this space of clarity, this space of confidence, this space of focus, this space of flow that a lot of us are seeking, but yet we're not doing the things necessary to get us there. And thus we seek the tools, we seek the technology, we seek the hacks, we seek the quick fixes that actually don't provide the quick fix because it hasn't established the routine and stimulus to get us exposed to that stress to begin with.
Yeah. I think, and just as important, and you just mentioned this, is that there has to be the rest and digest. There has to be what we would call the parasympathetic rebound from sympathetic stimuli. So whatever those might be. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes you find people that are just on and on and on all day long, and they never take any moments to recover. I know you're big on recovery, and recovery is all about being parasympathetic. And you'll find people that are working out hard, and then they're doing something else hard, and then they're doing this and doing that, and they think that that's what they need to do, but they're completely missing the other aspect of, like, they don't recover, they're going to burn. This is both mentally and physically.
100%. I call that the seeker. The person that's continually seeking something more. They have to prove themselves by doing more and doing more and doing more. And it's, okay, great. I'm going to go get that hard workout in. I'm going to go run 10 miles. I'm going to go get back to back Zoom calls all day so that I can push the business forward. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to take the kids here. And then I'm going to meet my friend here. And then I'm going to come home and have dinner with my wife. And then I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to have a frustrated sleep because I sent emails right until I went to bed. And I'm going to get a low night's sleep. And I pride myself on getting 5 hours of sleep because I'm getting up and I'm doing it all the next day. And I'm seeking and I'm grinding. But yet, at some point, Newton's third law, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. That seeking and overreaching is going to send you like a hard balloon. Well, I guess a balloon isn't all that hard, but a cannonball all the way down into that burnout and blow up space where, and we get into that cycle where, I'm good for 3 months. No, I'm bad for 2 weeks. Oh, I'm good for 3 months. I'm bad for 2 weeks. And we don't need to go through that. As long as we are able to find that rhythm between let's push, let's reach, let's overreach, let's stress, but now let's rest, let's digest, let's allow the body to super compensate and come back stronger, more clear, more creative, more aware than before. And that's what growth looks like. Yeah,
I'm with you. I mean, I think oftentimes people can get away with a lot when they're younger, and they don't and then things start getting harder as they get older. Yeah. They don't recover as well. They don't sleep as well. They used to sleep like a baby until they were 30, and now they can't get to bed because they have all these things like you just described. They can get away with 5 hours of sleep and now they can't. I'm certainly guilty of this on some level too, being getting trained in being a doctor and having a young family and working nights at the hospital. And my late 20s and early 30s were not great for those kinds of things. And so even somebody who ideally knows better, like me, of course, you can run it for a long time without realizing you're doing any damage to yourself until you start waking up with pain, and then you wake up and you can't recover, and then you're out for a week because of another injury. And these are things that happen as you and in my experience, actually, to some degree. And I have to, I always like to say that, we're all a work in progress. It's not like, and I talked about this with my kids too, it's not like I can give you these lessons and you're done. It's like these are lessons you constantly have to learn, constantly have to relearn, constantly have to screw up, and constantly have to redo. It's the nature of the human existence and our evolutionary programming to continue to have to do that. It's just part of the deal.
How are you able to shift from what was normal for you as a doc, especially in that industry and in that space, the night shifts, the long period of work time, the long time of stress? I'm sure you had a family during this for some of these years. How were you able to shift from what was normal as a doc and what was expected to ultimately what you do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to understanding. I grew up in the space that I always knew the right thing to do, in the sense that it was just that I went away from it for a period of time to become a doctor and to become a dad and to do and to start getting all these businesses together that I thought I needed to be on all cylinders at all times, kind of thing, to be able to do. And I think it was kind of in my mid 30s that I realized that I wasn't really doing what I really wanted in life, in the sense that I was having some projects that weren't working. I thought I was going to be getting out of the conventional space, and things weren't really working in the way that I wanted them to. And that's when I had these sort of, like we were talking about before, doing some fasting, changing mindset. And then after all of that, I started changing how I operated, basically, and going back to some early principles of what I truly felt were real and were real for me, or just foundational for me. How am I sleeping? How am I eating? What are my relationships looking like? The basic things, right? And then building on top of that and doing more at that point, understanding that I was getting very involved in hyperbaric therapy at this time. I was getting involved in clinics. I was getting involved in training. I was getting involved in consultation. So I was doing a lot more of this. And I was realizing, as we were talking about in the beginning, it's a fantastic tool. It's amazing for healing. It's amazing for optimization. It helps with recovery, but it can't be done in a vacuum. Yeah. And I was having people that I was working with that weren't doing well in the chamber. They, for all intents and purposes, they should have done well. They had a brain injury. It should have gotten better. They had a back problem. They should have had less pain. They had Lyme disease. It should have improved, but they weren't getting better. And I realized that a big part of what I was missing was a foundational approach, looking at foundational health and I was
behaviors, lifestyles.
Yeah, all that stuff being really important and really foundational, alongside a way to actually quantify how well people were doing physiologically. And so that's when I started adding on more testing. I met a very, very smart doc who had trained in the Philippines. His name is Dr. Ted Atracoso. And Dr. Ted had created a framework called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, which is a foundational approach to health that looks at optimizing health rather than disease, and looks at optimizing foundational markers, moving all of your normal values to when you were 21 to 30 years of age, everything from cellular health to gut health to hormones, et cetera. And I realized that this is the part of my practice that I was missing. It was because I was doing a lot of the diet, lifestyle, like the basic stuff, but what about actually dialing in energy metabolism, dialing in antioxidants, dialing in gut health and hormones and things. And so I started doing that not only on my patients, but on myself, of course, obviously, as the guinea pig for all of this. And I was seeing the effects like very, very quickly on how you could do this and how you can shift it. And so that's when I started becoming more of, I call it the hyperbaric smokescreen, in the sense that people would come to me and talk, and they still do, they talk to me about hyperbaric therapy. I work with patients all over the world in clinics and clinicians, and I integrate lots of technologies with hyperbaric therapy in various ways. I have a company that makes products in the hyperbaric space and hardware and software that does this as well. But again, all of this is in the context that I've gotten disinvited from lectures in the hyperbaric space because I tell people in my community to not put them in the chamber. Do not put them in the hyperbaric chamber until some of this stuff is done, or you're going to not help them either in the short term and or in the long term, because you're not dealing with some of this basic stuff first. It's, I can tell you, I mean, I told you just now, but like there's so many examples of people that should have gotten better, but don't, because this stuff hasn't been done. And then when we start doing some of this work, they see these profound shifts. Sometimes they don't even need to go into a hyperbaric environment. And I'm totally happy with that. But the focus for me has just shifted. The focus is now personally on this foundation, optimizing this foundation, measuring this foundation, being consistent with it from a physiologic side, and also the cognitive training, as we talked about before, and then also using this with my clients and patients in a more holistic way. And I've seen like the dramatic benefits of that over the last about 5 years now, I would say, when I've been doing it most significantly.
I love the concept. I mean, again, I said this at the beginning of the show, where you and I just see so eye to eye, because that's foundationally what Own It does. We getting your cellular testing done, getting your hormone therapy done, getting your gut biome done, getting these basic blood work samples done to be able to look at and go, oh no, it's not the fact that you're in the normal range. What is the optimal range that we want to start to work on? And then what do we need to do from a habit, a lifestyle, a supplementation standpoint? And then where can we use the therapy? Where can we use the tools and the technology to help get us there? But we've got that foundation set, and you're leaning in, and the world is constantly telling us we need all of these things, but we have no idea what's actually happening internally. There's no way to measure. What you can't measure, you can't manage. What you don't understand, you can't steward. How are we knowing what's working? And that's why I think the health and wellness industry, the biohacking industry has just confused us so much more as consumers, right? That they've just tightened up the tornado on everyone, and people are just stepping into the tornado and getting taken away, and they don't know what hit them. And it's like, well, I just spent $40,000 and I don't feel any better. I've just spent the last 3 months in a therapy, bought a red light bed for my house, and I've been in it every single day, but like, I still don't sleep better. I still have all these wrinkles. I still eat and I'm bloated and I don't feel well. Like, why is that? Well, we didn't get the cellular regeneration we needed because it's still a hot dumpster fire inside your body. Like, yeah, totally. Let's get rid of the dumpster fire and then let's get you into that red light bed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% aligned with that. My whole philosophy is let's work on the basics. Let's build the foundation. Let's add on tools and technologies. Let's add on supplements and practices as you go. But it's not like throwing the kitchen sink at people unless it's an emergency situation, unless you have no choice, but somebody's sick and you just got to get everything on board. I call it my educationally throwing shit at the wall strategy. And I certainly have one, and I utilize it, and it can be very effective for people, but it's not my first choice. Yeah, obviously, if I have an option. So
totally. I love it. Can you dive into everybody, or just kind of, I always ask these two questions at the end of our guests, but what is your non-negotiable habit that you engage in every single day?
My non-negotiable habit is probably, there's more than one. I think the number one thing is, having sort of the one sort of my personally and the one sort of, outside of me, let's say that. But the personal habit is that I always take moments every day to breathe. And that could be breathing in a meditation. It could be a specific breathing practice. It could be breathing in my sauna. But there's at some point in every day, at least once a day, where I take at least 5 to 10 minutes and I do that. That's a non-negotiable for me. It has to be done. And if I don't do it, I feel the effects of it very quickly. So
I love it.
So that's my non-negotiable. And outside of that, like my other non-negotiable is that I'm always in teaching mode with my family, like and my kids. Like it's not like I'm just like the dad that just like talks about, whatever. Like you tell me something, I'm going to take it the next level and we're going to talk about it. Right. And so that's always, I feel like my role, and that might just be before they go to bed. It might be in the morning. It might be in a car ride, but like every day with all of my kids, at least once. That's my goal. And that's non-negotiable too.
I love it. That's going to A little nice follow-up there is a shameless plug for a book coming out in about 14 months is Breath of Fire. So I love that. It's one of my non-negotiables too. I love intentional breathing. We could do a whole podcast just on breathing and the terrible evolution that's happened in our world in terms of breath work, but and our inability to breathe as human beings and its impact on us. But I love that. And then second, what is your definition of ownership, being somebody who lives in it so intentionally?
Yeah, I love the whole concept and how you create it, Justin, and how you created this. I think of this in so many different ways. I think that what might be illustrative would be so I have a company. It's called Smarter, Not Harder. It's a company that makes products for focus and for health optimization and for anxiety and things like that. The greater mission, though, is to relieve suffering in ourselves and others, knowing that there really is no other, right? And so if you own the understanding that we're all a part of this same cosmic joke, right? That we're all in this together, it gives you a very different feel on how you approach your relationships, your days, your moments, your hours. And if you can give people the freedom of suffering by giving them tools, cognitive tools, physical tools, technologies, supplements, these are all things that can be helpful, but getting the foundation in order is the true freedom in all of it, right? So if you own your foundation, you own your freedom, really, and then you can take it from there wherever you want to go. So freedom from suffering, knowing that in ourselves and others, there really is no other, and then owning your foundation as a way of just showing up in the world is the way that I would approach it.
So good. So good. Dr. Scott, where can people find you? Where can people get more information on you, follow you, listen to your podcast, all that type of stuff?
Sure. So yeah, many places. If you're interested in the hyperbaric work that I do on the hyperbaric side, and I work with people all over the world, you can go to my website. It's just my name, drscottsherr.com, DRSCOTTSHERR.com. And that's where you can get most of my work on the hyperbaric side. If you're interested in the podcast and my company that creates the products and the nonprofit organization, the nonprofit is called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. You can check out homehope.org. If you are a practitioner, either a medical doc or non-medical, you have training available to you there. And it's something you can use with your clients or your patients and use it in your practice as a way to build a foundation using data-driven metrics and a health focus. Our podcast that has grown out of that is called the Smarter, Not Harder podcast. And that's on any podcast platform. I'm one of the hosts. There's four of us hosting all together, and we kind of rotate, making it easier than you having to record all the podcast yourself. Justin, makes my life a little bit easier.
Need to get on that.
Yeah, it's a good deal. I'm telling you. And then we also have our for-profit organization that's called Troscriptions. It's like prescriptions, but with a TRO in front of it. This is our company that makes precision dose pharmaceutical grade and physician formulated products for people that need help now with focus and with health optimization and with anxiety and stress and things like that. So that company is really great. It's really a company that grew out of the nonprofit to help people right now while they're optimizing their health, which, as we know, it doesn't happen overnight.
I love it. So guys, as you go forward, the 1 cent solutions to the $64,000 problems, where can you make the most ground? Where can you create the foundation that's built on rock so that you can handle the storms that you're going through? How can you create the physiological shifts that create the psychological shifts while also understanding what psychological shifts need to happen so you can create the physiological shifts? Because at the end of the day, we can't continue to borrow money from the banks when there's no cash left. It's always going to be bankrupt, and we're going to be ultimately left in a space of illness because we either choose our health or we choose our disease. It's our choice. Whatever we're doing, we're earning. We're earning our stress, we're earning our illness, we're earning our disease, or we're earning our health. And for you as business owners, executives, and people who are living that high performance life, there's an evolutionary component that we have to undo. There's a component that we have to lean into and take ownership of so that we can seek, look, think, and feel different. But ultimately, you have to choose different. Remember, at the end of the day, ownership is owning the foundation. Be different, live different, because success is different. We'll see you guys next week.